What is up, guys? Rick Cactus here, bringing you the latest Destiny 2 news and information. And today we've got some pretty big stuff to go over, mainly about how PvE and the Crucible are being balanced in relation to each other in Destiny 2, with some potential big changes. So, this information is coming courtesy of a PlayStation Lifestyle interview with Luke Smith, who is the main guy from Bungie on Destiny 2. You could not ask for a better source, and I will link that in the description down below. Now, also want to quickly say that when this video comes out, I'm going to be on a plane to Florida because I'm going to GuardianCon 2017. So if any of you guys are there, don't be afraid to come up and say hello. Now, moving on to the actual news. Now, there are some pretty lengthy quotes and questions, so I'm just going to read those straight to you guys, and then after we're going to analyze what that means for Destiny 2. So let's start at the top with the biggest piece of information. So PlayStation Lifestyle asks, PvP versus PvE balancing is a touchy point, but it's something that makes Destiny unique. You can go through PvE and you can jump into the Crucible and it feels and plays the same. You have the same weapons, same armor. How are you approaching that going into Destiny 2? Will you be separately balancing them, or are you trying to maintain parity? And of course, this is a great question because this is something that players have been wondering about, have been debating about within the Destiny community for a long time. How do you maintain that balance? And a lot of players would argue that they didn't do the best job of doing so in Destiny 1. Now, Luke Smith replies, quote, "We've got some stuff that we've already been able to do historically, which is adjust damage values against the monsters, etc, etc, etc. So that's what's going to continue. The main difference here, I guess first and foremost, we're still thinking of it the same way. One character, one arsenal, taken across both lines. Does that mean that we will always have, quote, bring your own guardian? Not necessarily, but it means Destiny 2 is going to ship with bring your own guardian in both." And then he continues, "I think there are opportunities to explore other things in that space." So that right there is quite interesting, and he actually continues into more in-depth balancing, but we're going to stop right here and analyze what he said, because what he said actually has huge ramifications in Destiny 2. I've seen a lot of people wondering if there's going to be any substantial changes to the balancing system regarding PvE and PvP. For example, are there going to be weapons that you can only use in PvP? Are there going to be PvE weapons that you can't use in the Crucible? These are totally legitimate questions, but from what Luke Smith just said, the answer is no. There's going to be, quote, build your own guardian at Destiny 2's launch. So we can expect the exact same system of complete transferability between PvE and PvP in Destiny 2 as there was in Destiny 1. However, it was very interesting that, even in this interview, even just answering that question, whereas what he said originally that, no, we're using the same system, answers the question that he was being asked. He continues, however, and says, we're toying with opportunities to explore new things in the future. We could potentially see playlists, like very competitive playlists, where only certain weapons you're able to use. Perhaps you actually have to pick from a certain predetermined class even, and then compete with that. That's something that we could realistically see because it's clearly something Luke Smith himself is realistically thinking about. He is exploring opportunities with changing up how these weapon systems are balanced in Destiny 2. So that is, depending on how you take that information, that is either good or bad news. I think it's good news because the Destiny 1 system obviously did, it had its flaws, but it did in essence work, and it's very good to see that they're also toying with potentially separate ideas in the future. Moving on, however, Luke Smith continues answering this question and gets even some more interesting stuff. He says, "But for us right now, the tuning path is pretty different this time. The weapons are all hand-built in a way where before they had random talents. We can look at an entire archetype like hand cannons, and then we can look at the data on usage rates for hand cannons and sort usage rates, and then within usage rates check kill death ratios, per hand cannon and find out what is actually effective and what is not. And then, because the weapons are all hand built, we can take a given hand cannon and say, let's change this one hand cannon, rather than let's pave this entire archetype. So we have opportunities in front of us that we haven't had before because of the way we've built the weapons, and hopefully we'll seize those opportunities. So again, some really interesting stuff here. Mainly, did Luke Smith just say that all weapons have predetermined perks in Destiny 2? He says weapons are hand-built, and he says before they had random talents, whereas essentially saying this time they don't. Well, that's a narrative I have seen, that a lot of people take that quote, and in fairness, it does look like he may be saying that, and then saying, are the weapons in Destiny 2 hand-built? Quite frankly, I hope they're not, because if you do have hand-built weapons, yes, you get a little bit better balance, but you massively lack diversity. You just don't have the same feeling of a loot-based game. However, it also looks like he may not necessarily be saying that, and random talents may refer to things like handling and reload speed and magazine size, the talents of the gun, whereas perks could be something different. I think the main point, that's kind of ambiguous, but again, the main point to get from this quote is that they can specifically tune certain weapons, whereas in Destiny 1, apparently they couldn't. They could maybe for the exotics, but they couldn't for specific weapons. So, like right now, hand cannons. What are the problem? Because they just got a nerf rather recently. What were the problem hand cannons? Well, the IS Luna, the Palindrome were definitely being used a lot. Was something like the word of Crota problematic? Well, no. The word of Crota was not problematic in PvP. I can say that with absolute certainty. However, when Bungie nerfed hand cannons, they also nerfed a little bit the word of Crota. That's what happens. When you have these blanket archetype nerfs, there's only a couple of weapons that just have god tier stats, like the Palindrome and the IS Luna, but unfortunately every hand cannon usually gets nerfed, and that is definitely problematic. And the fact that Luke Smith is quite literally saying that won't happen in Destiny 2, and then we can just go after the god tier weapons and leave an archetype for the most part alone, is a really, really good thing. And as someone who mainly plays PvE, like I don't know about you guys, but that makes me very excited, because too often you'd have a bunch of PvE guns that were nerfed for PvP reasons just because they belong to a quote-unquote problematic archetype. So that's some great insight into how Destiny 2 is going to be balanced. But speaking of the Crucible, Luke Smith actually did say that PvP is going to have its own unique audio mix, which is going to make the game feel different. That's really interesting. PvP has unique audio. Now what that means, importantly, is that there's an opportunity for using audio cues to help you gain advantage in PvP, otherwise known as sound whoring. You know, potentially hearing footprints, hearing activated supers and abilities, hearing melees, hearing all of that stuff. If you have good sound equipment, you can hear all of that happening and know exactly what's going on. And that has been, you know, when you get to these very competitive games, you often do have that. Being able to recognize these sounds, and that kind of is what can distinguish good players from absolutely excellent players. As the excellent players will really listen and use the audio cues to their advantage. Now, yes, it can get kind of annoying playing against those people, I'll admit, but that is a potentially very interesting line of development that Destiny 2 does have. And now, moving on from there, we get a little bit of information about characters and story development within Destiny 2. PlayStation Lifestyle asks, are we going to be exploring the fates of any other beloved characters? And this was just after asking about Zavala. I know the Vanguard is a big focus, with each of them being on different planets, but are we going to be seeing more of these characters that players have come to love and hate, such as Rahul, the Cryptarch? What is the fate of Rahul? Broombot, we briefly see in the opening mission. Amanda Holiday, she might be at the farm. Luke Smith then replies, you're going to have more exposure to some of those folks for sure. Some will return, some will not. Some of the characters that do not return will not have an explanation. We're not going to say what happened to Character X because, you know, we don't need to at this time. And because when character X returns, maybe that character will have a story that they want to tell you about where they went. So that's some cool information. Just talking about these characters that, again, we've got to know and love. Sweeperbot is just a robot NPC in the tower that's been sweeping for 3 years straight. But we want to know, we're kind of invested in this character. The Cryptarch was another great example. The Cryptarch doesn't do much. He stands there and he disappoints us most of the time, and sometimes excites us. But we want to know more about this character. And it really does look like in Destiny 2, Bungie is taking an opportunity to expand on certain character developments and expand it on more story. One of the most interesting parts about Destiny 2 involving story is the addition of adventures. Adventures are essentially side quests. They are quests that are given out specifically by NPCs, and you do a certain thing for that NPC. It was even said that adventures will be big enough to have their own unique mechanics and can reward substantial awards that really make them worth doing. So hopefully we will see adventures given out by Rahul and so on that will give us more insight into who this character is. It was also interesting that Luke Smith kind of kept the door open for pretty much everyone. Hey, you don't see this person in Destiny 2? Well, we're not going to necessarily say where they went or that they're dead or whatever. You might see them again. Maybe you won't, maybe you will. And that again is, I think, just Luke Smith doing what any developer with a lick of sense would do and leaving that door open, letting them explore different storylines. We might not see the Stranger, the Exo Stranger from the original Destiny storyline anywhere in Destiny 2, but maybe in a Destiny 2 expansion, they'll finally make a return and hopefully, like Luke Smith said, actually explain where the hell they went and what the heck they even are to begin with. And in fact, Luke Smith did end this quote by saying, certainly some of those characters, like Rahul, I mean, what's a Destiny game that doesn't have a Cryptarch? I don't know. So it looks like Rahul is making a comeback, that disappointing guy. Anyways, guys, that is it for all of the latest Destiny 2 news. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. Now, if you did, please remember to help me out by simply rating and especially sharing this video. If you guys want to see more Destiny 2 content, be sure to slap that subscribe button. But if you actually want to do something, make sure to press the bell beside subscribe. Now, if you guys want to get in touch with me and keep up to date with the latest channel activity, the best way is to follow me on Twitter at RickCacus. That's linked in the description down below, as is my Twitch channel, which you could also follow. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video, and as always, have a good day.